is time for the ever-important post-draft off-season power rankings. Today we're going over the 1 through 5s, the best of the best in the AFC. Next week we'll cover the NFC, but right now we're talking about the Big Boy Conference, the best conference in football. The conference who has represented and won the Super Bowl the last 2 years. And a quick honorable mention before I get into it, the Cleveland Browns. And we all know their injury situation last year. We all know their current quarterback situation. If Nick Chubb can return to 80% of what he was before that knee injury, and their defense stays moderately healthy, they're going to be a dominant team. Great running attack, best defense in football, best defensive player in football. They are going to be competitive. I certainly don't think they're going to be a losing team. By virtue of playing in the AFC North, their record's going to be worse than it would be otherwise, but still, that is a solid squad who could conceivably make the playoffs and maybe go on a little bit of run if they get the right matchups.
I think the Browns, they're going to win football games. You mentioned have the best defense in the NFL. If Nick Chubb or they have one of the best defenses in the NFL. If Nick Chubb is healthy, that helps their offense out a lot. I simply do not believe in their quarterback. They might have, if you take out rookie quarterback performances or even second-year players, they have the worst veteran quarterback in the AFC in Deshaun Watson. I just don't believe in him. I even believe in Russell Wilson on the Steelers a little bit more than I believe in Deshaun Watson or Justin Fields on the Steelers for that matter. So I think the AFC North is loaded. I think there's potential the entire AFC North could make the playoffs. I just think the Browns right now are the worst of the bunch from that division.
Ridiculous and preposterous take made by a Steelers lover, no doubt. You got an honorable mention, or are we getting into the list now?
I don't have...
no honorable mentions.
Well, one
no
of my honorable mentions
I
know is on your top 5, so I can address them when they come up.
All right. Well, rolling into that, I'll go with number 5 for the Buffalo Bills. And I know the reaction is going to be, oh, the Bills got so much worse, they're rebuilding, yada, yada, yada. Their offense got better. Point blank, period. Their offense is going to be better this year than it was last season. Gabe Davis, incredibly inconsistent. Replaced him with Curtis Samuel. Much more consistent, better target. Keon Coleman, solid rookie. Fills a role which was definitely needed in the offense. The bigger bodied receiver. Dalton Kincaid, solid year 1. Going to go into year 2 looking to improve on that. Their running game is going to establish. They lock down their left tackle. Khalil Shakir is clearly the guy offensively. Quality number 1 receiver. That offense is going to improve in the absence of Stephon Diggs. Getting him out of the locker room is a net positive. As for the defense, their secondary got tore up. I'm not trying to deny that, make claims that it didn't happen, but they've done stuff to fill those holes, replace the players who were lost, and look, the safeties and Tre'Davious White were getting old. They were getting injury prone. They were not going to be worth it to keep bringing back on these multi-year, $10 million+ contracts. It was time to move on, and the defense is going to take a little bit of a hit, but I don't think it's going to be that drastic. I think they're going to be just fine, particularly playing in the AFC East. Still win 11, 12 games, still make the playoffs, still probably win their division. They're the 5th best team in the AFC to me.
I agree a lot with what you said, and I'll address them in a second more specifically, but you mentioned Gabe Davis, a player that left their team this offseason, went to the Jaguars. The Jaguars are my 5th best team in the AFC right now. If anyone has listened to us before or listened to us recently, I have been disappointed with the Jaguars. I think a lot of people were disappointed with how they performed last season. I was disappointed with how their offense looked even before the Trevor Lawrence injury, the Christian Kirk injury, and everything that went downhill. But with their draft class, with the moves they made in free agency, I love what the Jaguars have done, and I'm going to get caught being maybe a little bit too optimistic for them again this season, but with adding a 6'3 receiver with 4'3 speed on the outside in Brian Thomas, I like that addition over signing Calvin Ridley to the type of contract the Titans signed him to. Gabe Davis on the outside, allowing Christian Kirk to operate from the slot, Evan Ingram to operate from tight end or the big slot role, dominate the middle of the field, and then you have Travis Etienne out of the backfield. The Jaguars have done everything possible to make Trevor Lawrence successful in his contract year.
Everything but the most important thing. The most important position on offense, more than even quarterback, is the offensive line. Those are 5 players who are the cornerstone of any successful unit. Of the teams we are going to talk about today, I am certain the Jaguars have the worst offensive line. Regardless of the moves they made this offseason, it's still not good. good. It's still below average. And I am never going to say, oh, well, they have all these flashy pieces on the outside. Surely they're going to succeed. Trevor Lawrence is once again going to find himself hurt, injured, incapacitated if he has to go up and try and pass 20, 30, 40 times a game behind this sorry unit. It's just not the answer. It's not there yet. That's what's really holding them back. Their front seven's great. Their receivers, great. The running situation, fine. I have a lot of faith in Trevor Lawrence, but that O-line is going to continue to hold the Jaguars back. That's why they're not on my list.
It's still not great. I just really like how I think the offensive pieces are going to complement each other. I like how they added more pieces to that defense through the draft with both defensive tackles from LSU. And I think they also added Arik Armstead to the front seven and added Darnell Savage to the secondary. So they got better on defense. So offensive line, obviously the biggest question mark. But I believe in their ability to make the playoffs this season. And
I don't think adding Savage does much for their secondary. I think there's still room to improve that. But they'll be a fine team, win 9-10 games. I just don't think they're one of the 5 best in the AFC. They're definitely going to be a wild card.
Since you mentioned the Bills, that is also my 4th best team in the AFC. I'm even a little bit higher than Isaiah is on them, which is kind of surprising given Isaiah's fandom for the Bills organization. I think if there's anyone who is completely down and out on the Bills, I think you are a little crazy. When you take a look, Isaiah mentioned a bunch of the moves already. Dalton Kincaid, I think as a rookie tight end, he's only going to be better in year 2. Khalil Shakir, you said he's for sure a number 1 receiver.
You watched the back half of last year?
I mean, he was very good at the end of last year, but he needs to show a lot more before we can call Khalil Shakir number 1 receiver. I like Keon Coleman a lot. I don't really, maybe some people care that his 40 time was a little bit slower, but I like the talent that he is a lot. I think he'll pairs perfectly with Josh Allen. And then they have a very good running back in James Cook. Now, they lost a lot of pieces, of course, on the defensive side of the ball. But when you get Matt Milano back in the middle of your defense, the signal caller of your defense, getting him back from that broken leg, I don't know how many people are even really talking about that or addressing it. I think that's going to be major for them.
They also got the best nickel cornerback in football, in my opinion, Terrion Johnson. Maybe not capable of going on the outside and banging with a true number 1s, but in terms of locking down the slot guys, he is up there. And they got him on a pretty good contract, too. He helps mitigate the losses in that secondary.
Like you said, I think for some of those guys, Jordan Poyer, who's another? Tre'Davious White. They were guys that were older, were not contributing at the level they were when the Bills were competing with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Now, I think there's a gap between the top 3 teams, at least on my list, and 4, 5, and even whatever honorable mentions I may have had. But the Bills, they are still going to be a playoff team, especially playing in the AFC East. You have Josh Allen, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. They're still going to be very good despite the losses and what people might be saying about them.
Now, a team I'm surprised to hear you not even acknowledge at 4. Maybe you've got them in the top 3, maybe you don't have them in the list, but I got the Bengals at 4. And I have many of the same issues with the Jaguars I do with the Bengals. The interior of that offensive line is not good. But credit to them. They now have the Browns at tackle. Trent Brown and Orlando Brown, 2 massive human beings, 6'8", 350 apiece. They are going to do a better job than what has been previously done to keep Joe Burrow up and on his feet. The T. Higgins stuff, he's coming back and playing. I don't think he's going to hold out long term. Still have Jamar Chase. Still have Joe Burrow. Losing Joe Mixon hurts, but Zach Moss is a pretty solid running back and can run outside the tackles a little bit better than Mixon does, which again, pairing with how bad the interior of that O-line is, might be an upgrade positional value-wise. Defensively, still very solid. They're going to run to the same issue, though, as the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens, and play in the AFC North. They're going to see their win total deflated. They're going up against a team who had the best record in the AFC last year and is going to try and repeat that. They're going to be stuck playing a division winner in the wildcard game. It's going to hold them back, keep them at the 4 spot, but I have a lot of faith in the Bengals if Joe Burrow can stay healthy.
I like the Bengals a lot too. They fall, if we were doing top 6, they would have fallen into that 6 slot for me. They would have been my honorable mention. I think you have Joe Burrow back. You hope he's finally able to stay healthy the entire year. They draft an offensive tackle in the first round. Will he start? Who knows, because they also signed an offensive tackle in free agency.
I'll go ahead and answer that for you. Mims is not starting day 1. He's a developmental guy and was always going to be. That's why I'm low on them. They did not draft needs for win now. They drafted developmental pieces.
Which is part of the reason I don't have them solidly in my top 5. To me, they're on the outside looking in a little bit. I mean, they lost Tyler Boyd. Is Burton going to come in and be that wide receiver 3 immediately? Will T. Higgins be able to stay healthy for the entirety of the season? So there are just some doubts I have with the Bengals. Also losing, they lost DJ Reader.
I'm glad you brought that up. They have done about as good of a job to replace him the aggregate as they could. Drafting Chris Jenkins, physical freak out of Michigan in the second round, getting the Texans defensive tackle, Sheldon Rankins, is going to replace that DJ Reader hole pretty well. I didn't think they had done a great job of that before the draft, but adding Jenkins kind of makes me confident that, okay, Reader has been replaced successfully.
And I don't hate the Bengals. Just for me, right now, I think the Bills and the Jaguars are better teams as far as way too early, right after the draft rankings.
My number 3, the Houston Texans. And a lot is being said about what they have done this offseason. They got 2 big, flashy names. I'm not trying to diminish that. They're my 3rd best team in the best conference in football. They're going to be great. Adding Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter bolsters that team. They've lost some pieces on defense, which I don't think are being talked about. Obviously, defensive tackle just went to the Bengals. They lost Grenard, who admittedly is not as good as Danielle Hunter, but leadership-wise, very popular in that locker room. And they lost Blake Cashman and didn't do a good job for replacing him, who is their linebacker, who was phenomenal in coverage and is now playing in Minnesota. I think that defense is staying about the same. Then you've got the offense. We know how good C.J. Stroud is. We know how good Nico Collins is. Tank Dell we wait to see if he is going to be healthy after that leg injury. A lot of signs saying, oh yeah, he's going to do all right, aside from the fact he got shot recently. Thankfully, he's still all right from that. But you add Stephon Diggs on top of that, and you say, okay, this could be the best offense in football. The thing holding them back is quarterbacks in their second year who have started all of year 1 historically struggle. Sophomore slump is a thing, ladies and gentlemen. I think having more film on C.J. Stroud could expose some of his weaknesses, and I am not in love with their secondary. I know they've got a few high-end pieces, but I feel like if it comes down to it, they could get air-raided by the top 2 teams or just ran over by the top 2 teams fairly easily come playoff time.
Well, I actually don't have the Texans at 3. I have them at 2, and the team I have at 3, which I'll address first since we're going in order, is the Baltimore Ravens, and it's very close with me and the Texans here in this conversation. And the thing that knocks the Ravens down slightly for me is the fact that they lost some pass rushers in the offseason that they didn't really make an effort to replace. They lost Jadeveon Clowney to free agency, who happened to have the best year of his career last year. And heading into next season, they're going to be relying heavily on Owe. They're going to be an older Kyle Van Noy. Maybe David Ajabo finally is able to play coming off that Achilles injury. But that is the only thing that's having me bump them down slightly with all the stuff the Texans did in the offseason. Now, I love what the Ravens did, adding Nate Wiggins to that secondary and also adding Rosengarten to that offensive line.
The Chiefs, or excuse me, the Ravens. They're the ones who added Nate Wiggins.
That's what I said.
You said the Texans.
I meant Ravens. I'm talking about the Ravens and Texans. The Ravens added Rosengarten to that offensive line, and I like what they did in the offseason. Of course, they added Derrick Henry, which will help that rushing attack, take some pressure off of Lamar Jackson. I like Zay Flowers. I think Rashad Bateman showed more flashes than he's ever had in his career last year, and they lost Odell. Not a major loss at this point in Odell's career. Mark Andrews hopefully will be back healthy. So the Ravens are in at 3. That pass rush, not exactly...
We'll talk about it later.
A clear vision, but the Texans, I mean, you echoed a lot of things I think about the Texans. You echoed a lot of things a lot of people think about the Texans, but what they've done in the offseason, how they've built that team over the last 2 years, I love the Danielle Hunter move. I think that is potentially the best free agency signing in the offseason just because of how it lines up with their future. Yes, it's a big contract, but they get to put an elite pass rusher opposite their defensive rookie of the year, giving them each more one-on-one matchups. I think that is awesome. And they added Stephon Diggs.
If I may, they had an elite pass rusher last year in Jonathan Grenard, who was well into the double digits in sacks. Let's not act like he's going from some bum to Danielle Hunter.
He was not going from some bum to Danielle Hunter, but Danielle Hunter is that guy. As a Vikings fan, you should know that. And Stephon Diggs, a lot of people are going to talk about, he's going to bring C.J. Stroud's game to the next level. I think Nico Collins is the better receiver than Stephon Diggs is right now. And Stephon Diggs, as long as he's willing to take on that role of maybe the number 2 option in the offense, that is an elite pairing. I love Tank Dell. I think that they were able to keep Dalton Schultz in the building, very good tight end to complement those pieces. I've said before, I think the Joe Mixon addition is slightly overrated, but good offensive line, great quarterback, great wide receiver trio, a defense that I think will only be better in year 2 of DeMeco Ryans' system. That's why they're the second best team in the AFC for me.
As long as Stefon Diggs is willing to do the thing, which has caused him to force his way out of the last 2 teams, things will be all right. I'd also point out that they're my third best team just because that move may have poisoned the well. Stefon Diggs has had bad relationships with his past 2 quarterbacks, and conceivably, if he does not get the targets he wants in a 1-year prove-it deal type thing, he might just force his way out of there or leave in free agency and say, okay, I'm going to be an absolute menace in the locker room. I am not going to help any of the young guys, and I'm going to yell to you to try to make myself a distraction. He's a wide receiver. They do that sort of thing. But leaving aside the various mental issues Stefon Diggs may or may not have, at number 2, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. 2-time reigning Super Bowl champion, yada,
Trying
yada,
to be
yada,
different.
yada. Not really trying to be different. They got worse this offseason. Right now, they're going to start Jawan Jones at right tackle. They're going to start, I'm going to get the pronunciation right here. They're going to roll into next season with Wanyan Morris as their left tackle. Started 4 games for him last year, was not special. Of the Oklahoma tackles who have come out in the past few years, he's the worst. They have issues at that position. They lost L'Jarius Sneed. They lost Willie Gay. I don't think they did a good job replacing either of those guys. Travis Kelce, getting older, now being paid as much as he properly deserves. Chris Jones, now on the wrong side of 30. Saw his production dip a little bit in the playoffs last season. Is he going to keep up his double-digit sack performances, or is that going to slip a little bit going into his twilight days? And Patrick Mahomes. Don't like predicting injuries, but you look at the other injuries around the NFL at the quarterback position. It's been pretty meaningful over the past few years. Patrick Mahomes has not missed a game due to injury once in the past 3 seasons. It feels like he is kind of due. That paired with getting maybe 1 contributor out of the draft is why I'm low on the Chiefs. And low on the Chiefs, mind you, is not me having them at 5-4 or 3. It's having them as the second best team in the best conference in football.
And I'm assuming we all know what your number 1 will be, but I don't think there are teams that did enough in the offseason or through the draft to jump the Chiefs as the best team in the AFC, considering the fact that the Chiefs were able to retain Chris Jones, who now is the bona fide best interior pass rusher in the NFL with Aaron Donald retiring. I think that was a massive move. And of course they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but that is their only real big loss from last season. And you take a look at maybe where that money went. It went to signing Hollywood Brown at receiver, who I think is going to be very good with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball to him. And you drafted Xavier Worthy, who has a lot of potential with all that speed and his route running ability. Now the Rashee Rice, all the stuff going on there, will he play next season? Hopefully that's the case for the Chiefs' sake as far as winning another Super Bowl. But even if he doesn't, just having those 2 receivers is better than the 5 receivers they had last season. I think the receiver room is going to be much more reliable, and hopefully, in Travis Kelce's old age, he's able to stay healthier this year than he did last year.
I don't know if I'd say. Again, you like the Hollywood Brown, the Marquise Brown signing, and you like the Xavier Worthy pick because they're going to a Chiefs. In a vacuum, these are not good signings. Bringing in Hollywood Brown to be your team's number 1 receiver is not a good thing. Xavier Worthy was the wide receiver 7 or 8. He went higher than he maybe deserved because of that 40 time. Which, hey, good for the Chiefs if it works out, but if any other team besides Kansas City made that pick, if the Bills stuck and made that pick, if the Jaguars picked Xavier Worthy there, any other team makes that pick, it's not a good pick. You are attributing success onto this player because he is going to play with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. Chiefs don't exactly have a long storied history of getting banger first-round players at the skill positions. Let's be honest with ourselves. We remember Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Remember what Sky Moore's done to him as an early pick. There's not exactly a track record of success there. Again, I'm saying all these negative things. Their defense is still going to be good. The interior of that offensive line is maybe the best in the league, and they've still got Patrick Mahomes. They're going to be the second best team in the AFC, and people are going to act like I'm being negative to them. That's a great compliment. They could very easily find themselves back in the Super Bowl, if not for the Baltimore Ravens, who, unlike the Chiefs, got better this offseason. You kind of just hand-waved the Derrick Henry signing when you go from J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who by week 5 are generally missing 2 ACLs between them, to Derrick Henry, one of the best running backs in football, who is now rushing behind the best O-line he's ever had in front of him for his entire career. You stick that next to Lamar Jackson, and you are going to have one of the most dominating rushing attacks in football history. Maybe the most dominating rushing attack in football history. Zay Flowers, very solid year 1. Going into year 2, I have a lot of faith for him. They were only 1 touchdown away from beating the Chiefs, if not for a Zay Flowers fumble and taunting penalty. I don't think people quite get how close Baltimore was to winning the Super Bowl. One mental mistake by a rookie receiver is what kept them from making it to the big game. I don't think he does that again. I think he is going to be better in year 2 than year 1. They added Tez Walker in the draft. I've never been a huge fan of his at UNC. I think Drake May playing with him helped, but him playing with Lamar Jackson is also going to help. That Raven system is going to be great for him. He can run block. He has good route trees. The hands, a little bit better. Could be a little bit better, but he's got time to improve them. He's going to be the wide receiver 3 next to Bateman. They've still got Mark Andrews, who despite him being injured for big portions of last season, the Ravens were still able to be the 1 seed in the AFC. This is a great offense. Talk about replacing Clowney. I get it. Big loss. But there's a reason he had the best season of his career from a pass rushing standpoint on the Baltimore Ravens. It's the Ravens system more than it is Jadeveon Clowney. Still a fine player. And you talk about, they lost pass rush. They still have their best pass rusher in Justin Mbike. And I'm glad you said, Chris Jones is by far the best interior pass rusher in football. Depending on what you classify Mbike as a 4-eye, maybe a 3 technique, he varies around. I would rather have him than Chris Jones.
Okay.
Doesn't command the same double team rate, much more sack production last year, higher pressure rates, very dominant.
They also lost Patrick Queen.
Patrick Queen, they have Roquan Smith. Any linebacker you stick next to Roquan Smith who can tie his shoes is going to be very functional. They draft Nate Wiggins. They draft Adisa Isaac, who is going to step in and be a contributor day 1. All 5 of their first 4-round picks are going to be early contributors. TJ Tampa is going to be a solid rotational piece in that secondary. They got better and were 1 touchdown away from beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs got worse. I'm taking them over Kansas City.
I mean, the Chiefs, they lost 1 key player in L'Jarius Sneed.
2,
I think
Rashee Rice. I'm counting that as a loss. You think Rashee Rice is A, going to come back week 1, and B, after a suspension, which is probably going to be extensive, is going to be as big of a contributor? You're out of your mind. He's going to be away from the team. He's going to be getting punched by the NFL. He might go to jail for all we know. That's a loss too.
He's getting sued. I don't know if he's getting charged criminally.
I would be amazed if he did not have something keeping him out of the Kansas City Chiefs facility, one way or the other.
I think the Chiefs' offense has more pieces on it than it did last season. And with what we've seen from Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, from that Chiefs defense and what they've built over the last few years, my faith is in them. I am not going to doubt the Chiefs. And obviously, we're splitting hairs between 2 teams that we think are going to be 2 of the best teams in the NFL next season. I mean, I think the AFC is better than the NFC. That may be 2 of the top 5 best teams in the NFL next season.
What type of comment was that? 2 teams are going to be 2 of the top 5 teams in the
whole NFL.
Yeah, no, we just said they're the better conference. Like, what type of commentary is that, man? Just say 2 of the best 3 teams. Don't say 2 of the best 5. 2 of the best 5 is something we should be saying about the NFC because they're the ones fighting to get in.
I said of the NFL because obviously they're 2 of the 3 best teams because we have.
You said 2 of the 5 though. You got 3 NFC teams higher than the Texans?
No.
Exactly.
Whatever. It doesn't matter.